Hi folks, with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this chat, I'd like to talk about how increasingly, in my view at least, Western governments all across the Western world are using the apparatus of state, that is the institutions that are meant to uphold the law and enforce the law and ensure fairness in law, and the impartial discharge of justice, that all of these institutions are being turned over and have been politicised and being used to crush opposition or dissent or disagreement or even questioning of the globalist project. Again, Western governments are all owned by the globalists, so anything that opposes or questions the globalist project, such as teaching critical race theory in schools and telling white kids they're evil and bad and that anything is better than white society, anything at all, no matter what it is that replaces it, anything is better than white society because white society is just so bad. So this use of institutions is causing it's having a knock-on effect. There is a decline in the standards of law enforcement and jurisprudence generally. There are activists in the district attorneys and public prosecutors departments. They're shot through with activists, for goodness sakes. The legal aid officers are wall-to-wall activists. So there isn't anyone there isn't an activist, I think. Increasingly the senior police officers are activists, district attorneys are activists, the list just goes on. Judges are activists and judicial officers and all sorts of legal experts in and around, or alleged experts, most of them are just flunkies, the so-called legal experts in and around the legal system, they're activists. So the government the globalist controlled governments can target pretty much any citizen, private citizen they want, who's committed no crime, but maybe they just disagree with teaching of critical race theory in schools. Maybe they disagree with other aspects of globalisation, for example, mass migration, or maybe they disagree that Black Lives Matter can go and torch whole districts and murder people and beat people up, and the police leave them alone. But when someone opposes or disagrees with, say, the COVID lockdowns, then the police are out in full force with riot gear, and particularly in Australia, baton charging protesters, shooting rubber bullets at them, beating them up, beating up old ladies, for goodness sakes. It's gone out of control, and certainly parts of Australia, all over Australia. But nonetheless, the using of the police to crush political dissent or political disagreement is now increasingly becoming the norm across the Western world. You see it in Britain, the police aid and abet climate change protesters while pulling out the batons on COVID protesters. The double and even triple standards is crazy. And it just clearly goes to show the politicisation of all the law enforcement apparatus of the state. It's now no longer law enforcement. It is used to crush disagreement with the globalist project. So, but it's having a knock-on effect in a whole lot of other ways. So it's not simply something they can surgically target just directly to support the globalist project. That may be what they're hoping for. Maybe that was their original intention. But once you go out and undermine all these organs of state, particularly law enforcement, it has quite drastic knock-on effects. It turns into a corrupt little tin pot bullshit dictatorship type attitude to justice and law enforcement. And I had a personal sort of brush with this, and I'll mention it only insofar as it indicates the wider malaise and decay and decline of law enforcement and the very essence of jurisprudence. And the West, if anywhere, the rule of law, due legal process, contract law, this is what separated the West, the wealthy West and the orderly West, from pretty much all other parts of the globe. I've done a lot of travelling, and the laws that we did once take for granted in the West hardly exist anywhere else. Arbitrary law is the go, and if you've got buddies in law enforcement, then you can get them to do your bidding with either a bribe or whatever. So just I'll just simplify this a little bit to illustrate how far it's come. And again, this is a personal experience. We'd rented a cabin in the snowfields, and it was only for a couple of months, and we paid up and did all the bits and pieces and paid in advance, booked in advance, and everything. So we arrived, we're there for a little while, and then the owner calls up and says, well, I want you to get out because I want one of my buddies to move in because they need it for whatever the reason. He was a bit vague on it, but nothing to talk about. You guys are out. So I said, well, look, we've paid up, we've got an agreement, we've got a written agreement, so that's not really going to work for us. And the guy comes back and says, well, look, I don't care about the written agreement, you're out, and that's the end of it. And we tried to broker a deal and say, well, if you give us a refund and this and that, nothing to talk about, you're out. Convinced me that I need to rethink my position. And I didn't take getting on for midnight. There's a knock on the door, and so I'm in bed, and so we get up, and who is it? And it's the police at the door. Yes, something happened. It's something. We just thought that maybe there'd been citizens who'd committed no crime. Now, that in itself is monstrous. Even a lot of these things are happening a long time, but nonetheless, he's retired. He's not there anymore. Goes to his buddies in the district attorney's office and just says, these people are committing a crime. Now, there's no burden of proof he has to meet. He doesn't need to show that any crime's been committed, or that in fact, he's lying to them because there's an agreement, a written agreement in place, a short-term rental agreement for a vacation cabin in the snowfields. And so there's no burden of proof there. They don't ask him to prove that this is happening. Instead, they go and instruct the police to go there. Now, the police went away and go, okay, no, you've got paperwork there, we're fine, and off they go. But it was still quite of a, again, knocking on the door at midnight with armed police officers. That's intimidation. Let's just call it exactly what it is. It's intimidation. So off they go, and we thought that was the end of it. So I said, the guy tried to come to heavies again. I said, no, look, let's make an agreement here. Okay, you want something to happen, you need to refund us this, or you need to compensate me for because the holiday cabins that are left at this late part of the season are the most expensive ones. They're not in this price range, and some of them are quite expensive. Very nice maybe, but expensive nonetheless. I didn't really want to pay that much. And so he was still adamant, nothing to talk about, you're getting the fuck out of there, end of story, and I'm going to up the ante if you don't get the fuck out. So what I anticipated was he'd hire a lawyer and then we'd do it that way. But instead, he goes back to the district attorney's office, gets them again to instruct the plan. This time, the district attorney's office comes up with crazy, legal precedent law stuff that was just so fantastic and ridiculous that it was absurd, but no more absurd than the stuff you see where the FBI goes after parents for opposing or disagreeing with critical race theory, calling them terrorists or Nazis or something like that. It's not that was the issue here, but it's the same sort of thing, creating this fantastic bullshit sort of suppositions about what the legality of the situation was that wouldn't have stood up in court for 5 minutes. But when you've got the apparatus of the state intimidating you and threatening you, you don't have those same legal options as you would through a lawyer that has to put forward legal arguments to why you should private citizens. Now that would mean time and aggravation anymore, so they backed away, and then we sort of, that forced him to get a lawyer and then shy a few days of the total time. But the issue here isn't he won, who lost, anything like that. It's that this is a situation where somebody was able, the law has been corrupted, and the police and the institutions have been corrupted so much. It's now considered as just like, it's just nothing to call up your buddies in the prosecutor's office or the district attorney's office and say, go and harass these private citizens. I don't like them. I want them out the way. I want them to behave in a certain way, or they're just opposing my whim, or arbitrarily disagreeing with. Yeah, in some piss poor tin pot bullshit South American banana republic. That's the sort of things that you see in those sort of places. It's not the sort of thing that you would see in the Western nations, the rich, wealthy Western nations that have standards of law, jurisprudence, and courts of law. Now, clearly, they weren't expecting the pushback from me there, and they weren't confident enough they could get in front of an activist judicial officer, could get in front of an activist judicial officer. They obviously thought, no, we're not sure which judge we'll get for this. It's too risky. We'll have to let it go. So this is an object lesson for all of us. If we don't hold our politicians accountable for this, due legal process, the rule of law, rules of evidence, and the non-politicization of the organs of law enforcement is absolutely vital. And if we can prevent this age theory stuff in school board meetings and so on, that every organ of the government is being used to harass people who may oppose globalisation or the feed-in issues to globalisation. That's my view. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.